Hi, my name is Kalina Despain, and I'm going to be presenting my Natural Disaster Preparedness Plan for earthquakes for GEO 3100. So an earthquake can easily be described as a sudden and violent shaking of the ground as a result of movements within the Earth's crust. Earthquakes can cause major damage when it's on a high enough scale. For example, this is a picture of Japan, and in 2011, Japan got struck with a massive 8.9 magnitude earthquake. I'll talk a little bit more about it later and the results of that, but basically Japan was pretty much destroyed and this earthquake wiped a ton of things out. So where do earthquakes occur? Sorry, I want you to be able to see the screen. They occur along faults. And when I created my own disaster plan for earthquakes, I based it off Logan, Utah, because I am a student at Utah State University and I spend a lot of my time around here. I found that one of the biggest faults that run through Utah is called the Wasatch Fault, and it's an active 240-mile-long fault that runs through central Utah up to southern Idaho. And basically, a lot of the earthquakes that occur on this are a 7 and higher on the magnitude scale. And while the earthquake itself is a disaster, it can be a disaster, it also increases the hazard because 75% of people live along and on this fault. And because of that, the hazard increases since a lot of people are uneducated for one and unprepared for a disaster like this to hit. So when they occur when two blocks of earth slip past each other, and there are in plate tectonics there are plate boundaries, and there are three main types. There is divergent, convergent, and transform. So divergent is when they're pushing away from each other, and convergent deals with subduction, and that's when they come in together like this. And then transform is when they move past each other like this. So ultimately, it involves the earth shifting. There's also the earthquake cycle. So earthquakes go through cycles where they go through a long period of time where it's not active, and then they go through a period where they have strain that accumulates and it produces these little earthquakes. And then they have a third stage, which are foreshocks, and foreshocks can or cannot happen. They're not required to occur before a major earthquake. But the fourth is the main shock, and that's when the major earthquake happens. And for Japan, that's when the 8.9 magnitude earthquake struck and destroyed a lot of things. But something that falls under 4 is aftershocks. And so after that big earthquake strikes, little earthquakes can follow for up to a year afterwards. So, So why they occur? So earthquakes occur because of the movement from the fault, and it causes shaking and surface rupture. So that's why we see like cracks in the ground as well. But it also deals with the shift in plate tectonics, like I talked about, the convergent and the divergent and the transform shifts. But faulting and shaking can result in other natural disasters as well, and other hazards such as fires, landslides, tsunamis. And that's kind of where I'm going to tie back into Japan, because when that 8.9 magnitude earthquake struck Japan, it was followed by a massive tsunami, and that tsunami was what wiped a lot of Japan out as well. So we have to be prepared not only for earthquakes, but we also have to be prepared for the other hazards that earthquakes can produce themselves. So how do we prepare for an earthquake? One of the big things is we have to understand the forecasting and listen for warnings. So for Logan, that might be listening to the radio stations that they have, and it may be signing up for natural disaster alerts. And not only does the city of Logan provide those, but as well as Utah State University provides natural disaster warnings that you can get straight to your phone. So it's important to look at the trends, understand where they can occur, how they can occur, and the severity that they can happen at. It's also important to build with good structure. So I talked about how 75% of people are living along this fault line in Utah, the Wasatch Fault line. And if we're not building our structures to withstand 7+ magnitude earthquakes, things are going to crumble. So it's important to build strong structures and to build in locations that will be able to withstand a strong earthquake that happens. It's also important to get insurance coverage. When an earthquake strikes, there's typically a lot of damage like we saw with Japan. So we want to make sure that we are properly insured so that if damage does occur, we are not left empty-handed. It's also important to ensure emergency reliefs are in place. So that's understanding the plans put in place by your city. That's understanding the plans put in place by Utah State or whatever school you're at. And it's also important to come up with your own personal plan. How are you going to get out? Where are you going to meet up? How are you going to survive with food and water? And that's kind of where the 72-hour kits come into play. It's super important to be prepared for any kind of disaster that strikes, but in this case, especially an earthquake. And that's where you can provide yourselves with a first aid kit. So if something were to collapse and fall and you got injured, that you would be able to put a Band-Aid on a cut or get the medical attention that you need that may not be available as easy as if the natural disaster hadn't occurred. So it's very important to be prepared with a 72-hour kit in case any kind of disaster were to strike. So kind of in conclusion, earthquakes can happen at any time, and we can't always predict exactly when they're going to strike, but it's important to be able to study those trends and to listen to those warnings being delivered so that we can prepare as best as we can for this disaster that could occur. And something that really stuck out to me is we always need to be prepared because it can happen again. One of the biggest flaws about human beings is saying, oh, it's not going to happen to me, or oh, it already happened, it's not going to happen again. So it's really important that if an earthquake has struck, or it's supposed to happen in the years to come, to be prepared because it can happen again. For example, if we had that level 4 cycle, if we had a major earthquake strike, we need to be prepared for the little aftershocks in case they cause any excess damage. But it's also important because another massive earthquake has the potential to strike, so we always need to be prepared regardless. Thank you.